Hey, this is Ms. Vandes again, and I'm going to do a quick reading of the first part of Walter Dean Meyer's book, Monster, and I'll read you the back cover. Steve Harmon's black. He's in jail, maybe forever. He's on trial for murder, and he is 16 years old. This book is written in the form of almost like a script. It's like a transcript of the trial. And of course, for me, I used to be a felony court reporter before I was a teacher, or in between times of being a teacher. And I think it's really interesting because, behind every case in court, there's a story and a person, and nothing is simple. That's one thing I learned as a court reporter, is that nothing is simple. So let me just go ahead and get started. I'll read you the first 15 pages or so. The best time to cry is at night when the lights are out and someone is being beaten up and screaming for help. That way, even if you sniffle a little, they won't hear you. If anybody knows that you're crying, they'll start talking about it, and soon it'll be your turn to get beat up when the lights go out. There's a mirror over the steel sink in my cell. It's 6 inches high and scratched with the names of some guys who were here before me. When I look into the small rectangle, I see a face looking back at me, but I don't recognize it. It doesn't look like me. I couldn't have changed that much in a few months. I wonder if I will look like myself when the trial is over. This morning at breakfast, a guy got hit in the face with a tray. Somebody said some little thing, and somebody else got mad. There was blood all over the place. When the guards came over, they made us line up against the wall. The guy who was hit, they made sit at the table while they waited for another guard to bring them rubber gloves. When the gloves came, the guards put them on, handcuffed the guy, and then took him to the dispensary. He was still bleeding pretty bad. They say you get used to being in jail, but I don't see how. Every morning I wake up and I'm surprised to be here. If your life outside was real, then everything in here is just the opposite. We sleep with strangers, wake up with strangers, and go to the bathroom in front of strangers. They're strangers, but they still find reasons to hurt each other. Sometimes I feel like I have walked into the middle of a movie. It is a strange movie with no like this. This is not a movie about bars and locked doors. It's about being alone when you are not really alone, and about being scared all the time. I think to get used to this, I will have to give up what I think is real and take up something else. I wish I could make sense of it. Maybe I could make my own movie. I could write it out and play it in my head. I could block out the scenes like we did in school. The film will be the story of my life. No, not my life, but of this experience. I'll write it down in the notebook they let me keep. I'll call it what the lady who is the prosecutor called me, Monster. Monday, July 6th, Monster. Fade in, interior. Early morning in Cell Block D, Manhattan Detention Center. Camera goes slowly down grim gray corridor. There are sounds of inmates yelling from cell to cell. Much of it is obscene. Most of the voices are clearly Black or Hispanic. Camera stops and slowly turns toward a cell. Interior, cell. 16-year-old Steve Harmon is sitting on the edge of a metal cot, head in hands. He is thin, brown-skinned. On the cot next to him are the suit and tie he is to wear to court for the start of his trial. Cut to Ernie, another prisoner, sitting on John, pants down. Cut to sunset, another prisoner, pulling on t-shirt. Cut to Steve, pulling blanket over his head as screen goes dark. Voiceover. Ain't no use putting the blanket over your head, man. You can't cut this out. This is reality. This is the real deal. Voiceover continues with anonymous prisoner explaining how the detention center is the real thing. As he does, words appear on the screen, just like the opening credits of the movie Star Wars, rolling from the bottom of the screen and shrinking until they are a blur on the top of the screen before rolling off into space. It looks like this. Monster, the story of my miserable life. Starring Steve Harmon. Produced by Steve Harmon. Directed by Steve Harmon. Credits continue to roll. The incredible story of how one guy's life was turned around by a few events and how he might spend the rest of his life behind bars, told as it actually happened. Written and directed by Steve Harmon, featuring Sandra Petrocelli as the dedicated prosecutor, Kathy O'Brien as the defense attorney with doubts, James King as the thug, Richard Bobo Evans as the rat, Osvaldo Cruz, member of the Diablos, as the tough guy wannabe, Laurel Henry as the witness, Jose Delgado, he found the body, and starring 16-year-old Steve Harmon as the boy on trial for murder. Filmed at the Manhattan Detention Center, set design, handcuffs, and prison outfits by the state of New York. Voiceover. Yo, Harmon, you gonna eat something? Come on and get your breakfast, man. I'll take your eggs if you don't want them. You want them? Steve, subdued. I'm not hungry. Sunset. His trial starts today. He up for the big one. I know how that feels. Cut to interior, Corrections Department van. Through the bars at the rear of the van, we see people going about the business of their lives in downtown New York. There are men collecting garbage, a female traffic officer motioning for a taxi to make a turn, students on the way to school. Few people notice the van as it makes its way from the detention center to the courthouse. Cut to prisoners, handcuffed, coming from the back of the van. Steve is carrying a notebook. He is dressed in the suit and tie we saw on the cot. He is seen only briefly as he is herded through the heavy doors of the courthouse. Fade out as last prisoner from the van enters rear of courthouse. Fade in, interior courthouse. We are in a small room used for prisoner-lawyer interviews. A guard sits at a desk behind Steve. Kathy O'Brien, Steve's lawyer, is petite, red-haired, and freckled. She is all business as she talks to Steve. O'Brien, let me make sure you understand what's going on. Both you and this King character are on trial for felony murder. Felony murder is as serious as it gets. Sandra Petrocelli is the prosecutor, and she's good. They're pushing for the death penalty, which is really bad. The jury might think they're doing you a big favor by giving you life in prison. So you'd better take this trial very, very seriously. When you're in court, you sit there and you pay attention. You let the jury know that you think the case is as serious as they do. You don't turn and wave to any of your friends. It's all right to acknowledge your mother. I have to go and talk to the judge. The trial will begin in a few minutes. Is there anything you want to ask me before it starts? Steve, you think we're going to win? O'Brien, seriously. It probably depends on what you mean by win. Cut to interior, holding room. We see Steve sitting at one end of bench. Against the opposite wall, dressed in a sloppy-looking suit, is 23-year-old James King, the other man on trial. King looks older than 23. He looks over at Steve with a hard look, and we see Steve look away. Two guards sit at a table away from the prisoners who are handcuffed. The camera finds the guards in a medium shot. They have their breakfast in aluminum takeout trays that contain eggs, sausages, and potatoes. A black female stenographer pours coffee for herself and the guards. Stenographer, I hope this case lasts 2 weeks. I can sure use the money. Guard 1, 6 days, maybe 7. It's a motion case. They go through the motions, then they lock them up. Turns and looks off camera towards Steve. Ain't that right, Bright Eyes? Cut to Steve, who is seated on a low bench. He is handcuffed to a U-bolt put in the bench for that purpose. Steve looks away from the guard. Cut to door. It opens and court clerk looks in. Court clerk, 2 minutes. Cut to guards who hurriedly finish breakfast. Stenographer takes machine into courtroom. They unshackle Steve and take him toward door. Cut to Steve is made to sit down at one table. At another table, we see King and 2 attorneys. Steve sits alone. A guard stands behind him. There are 1 or 2 spectators in the court. Then 4 more enter. Close up of Steve Harmon. The fear is evident on his face. Medium shot. People are getting ready for the trial to begin. Kathy O'Brien sits next to Steve. O'Brien, how are you doing? Steve, I'm scared. O'Brien, good, you should be. Anyway, just remember what we've been talking about. The judge is going to rule on a motion that King's lawyer made to suppress Cruz's testimony and a few other things. Steve, let me tell you what my job is here. My job is to make sure the law works for you as well as against you, and to make you a human being in the eyes of the jury. Your job is to help me. Any questions you have, write them down and I'll try to answer them. What are you doing there? Steve, I'm writing this whole thing down as a movie. O'Brien, whatever. Make sure you pay attention. Close attention. Voiceover, court guard. All rise. The judge enters and sits behind bench. He is tall and thin. He pushes his fingers through wisps of white hair and looks over the courtroom before sitting. He is a 60-year-old New York judge and already looks bored with the case. The court guard signals for people to sit. Judge, prosecution ready? Sandra Petrocelli, the prosecutor, stands. She is dressed in a gray business suit. She looks intense while still being attractive. Her hair and eyes are dark. Petrocelli, ready, Your Honor. Judge, defense? Asa Briggs, the lead counsel for the defense of James King, stands. He is dressed in a dark blue suit and a light blue tie. His eyes are also blue and his hair is white. Briggs, ready. O'Brien, ready, Your Honor. Judge, all right. I'm ruling the kid's testimony is admissible. You can bring up your motions relative to that ruling this afternoon, or if there's a break. Hope everyone had a good 4th of July. Briggs, the usual barbecue and a softball game that reminded me that I can't run anymore. O'Brien, with all the fireworks, it's my least favorite holiday. Judge, bring in the jury. Cut to film workshop at Stuyvesant High School. A film on a small screen is just ending. It is a class project, and the camera is shaky. We watch as a girl on the screen walks slowly away. Screen goes black, then dazzling white, then normal as lights go on. We see Mr. Sawicki, film club mentor, and 9 students who are dressed casually. Sawicki, in a jury competition, the ending would have hurt this piece, but otherwise it was interesting. Any comments? We see Steve raise his hand, looking much the same as he does in court. Steve, so this is a flashback to before this trial happened. You know, Steve is obviously a film buff because he's writing out this whole episode in his life as a film script. And so this is obviously where he gets his passion from. Steve, I liked the ending, Sawicki. I didn't say it was bad, but wasn't it predictable? You need to predict without predicting. You know what I mean? When you make a film, you leave an impression on the viewers who serve as a kind of jury for your film. If you make your film predictable, they'll make up their minds about it long before it's over. Cut to courtroom. We see the jurors filing in and taking their seats. Steve, to attorney. You think they look all right? O'Brien. They are what we have for a jury. We have to deal with them. Cut to long shot of Petrocelli. She stands at the podium in front of the jury. She smiles at the jurors and some smile back. Petrocelli. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sandra Petrocelli, and I'm an assistant district attorney for the state of New York. I am representing the people in this matter, which you were informed during jury selection is a case of felony murder. We're here today basically because this is not a perfect world. The founding fathers of our country understood this. They knew that there would be times and circumstances during which our society would be threatened by the acts of individuals. This is one of those times. A citizen of our city, a citizen of our state and country, has been killed by people who attempted to rob him. To safeguard our society, a system of laws has been created. You, the jury, are part of this system of laws. I represent the state of New York, and I am part of that system, as are the judge and all the participants in this trial. I will do my best to bring you the facts of this case, and I know you will do your best to judge the merits of this case. Most people in our community are decent, hardworking citizens who pursue their own interests legally and without infringing on the rights of others. But there are also monsters in our communities, people who are willing to steal and to kill, people who disregard the rights of others. On the 22nd of December of last year, at approximately 4 o'clock in the afternoon, two men entered a drugstore on 145th Street in Harlem. The state will contend that one of those men was Richard Bobo Evans. The state will contend that the other man who entered the store at that time and who participated in the robbery and the murder was James King. Petruccelli points to the table in which James King sits. Mr. King is the man sitting at that table who is wearing a brown suit and is sitting at the right of the table. You were introduced to him during the jury selection process. He is one of the men on trial here today. The purpose of the two men entering the store on that Monday was very simple. They were going to rob the owner, 55-year-old Aguinaldo Nesbitt. We will show that although the two men did not have a gun with them, the owner of the store did have a gun for which he had a license and produced it to defend his property. Mr. Evans, who participated in the robbery, will testify that there was a struggle which resulted in the gun being discharged and Mr. Nesbitt being killed. Mr. Nesbitt had every right to defend his property, every right not to be robbed. We all have that right. Further, there will be evidence that prior to the robbery, there was a plan or conspiracy to rob the store. Mr. Evans and Mr. King were to enter the store and do the actual robbery. Another of the planners of this crime was to stand outside the drugstore and impede anyone chasing the robbers. The young man who had this assignment will testify to his role in the affair. Yet another of the conspirators, the planners of this robbery that left a man dead, was to go into the store prior to the robbery to check it out, to make sure that there were no police in the store, to make sure that the coast was clear, as they say. Two of the conspirators will testify to their understanding of this fact. The man who was to enter the store and check it out is sitting at the other table. His name is Stephen Harmon. Cut to Steve Harmon. Then cut up to the of the pad in front of him. He is writing the word monster over and over again. A white hand, O'Brien's, takes the pencil from his hand and crosses out all the monsters. O'Brien, whispering, "You have to believe in yourself if we're going to convince a jury that you're innocent." Cut to Petruccelli. Sorry, I'm having a hard time reading all the movie terms. Petruccelli. A medical examiner will testify to the cause of death, showing that the gunshot wound was fatal. Even though it was Mr. Nesbitt's gun, it was not Mr. Nesbitt who caused his own death. This was no suicide. This death was a direct result of the robbery. Very simply put, this is a case of murder. It is, moreover, a murder committed during a felonious act. The two defendants you see before you will be shown to be participants in that act and are being charged with felony murder. Later, the judge will give you instructions on how to consider the evidence presented. But there is no doubt in my mind, and I believe by the end of the trial there will be little doubt in yours, that these two men, James King and Stephen Harmon, were all part of the robbery that caused the death of Aguinaldo Nesbitt. Thank you. Cut to courtroom. O'Brien is at the attorney's podium. Cut to Stephen's mother on wooden bench in the gallery area, listening intently. Her face looks worried. Okay, I'm going to stop there. This is just a tremendous book. It's won tons of awards, as we say in the teaching trade. It has lots of stickers on the front. But it's an important book too. In our society, we have a lot of issues dealing with race. We constantly have, a disproportionate number of young men who are African American specifically, who are streaming into our prison system. And I think it's really important for everyone to, think about our court system and think about how our citizens are being treated. whether or not they're being treated fairly, whether or not they're being prejudged. And certainly I know, having been a court reporter for a number of years in a felony courthouse in Virginia, there is a disproportionate number of young men who serve long sentences, who don't have good representation, who don't have the best attorneys, and whose attorneys don't always seem to be as interested in the facts. This is just a great book to help you to gain some empathy and understanding. If you if that's not part of your reality, I think one of the best parts of literature is that it does help you to stand in someone else's shoes and understand how they might, how their walk through life might be different from yours. So I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope you read this book, Monster. It's an amazing book. I'm sorry, it's reversed, by Walter Dean Myers, a great YA author. Thank you.